Hello everyone, my name is Dan from Baltic and today we're going to talk about different data types and web applications. So what is the purpose of this video? The aim of this video is to discuss the different data types available and how they work in software development. We will also cover what a web application is, what the benefits are, and also the background of them and what makes them tick. So let's move on to the agenda for today's video. As you can see, it's not many sections that we're going to be going through, as it is quite a short video. We'll start off with different data types and cover a bit of an explanation behind them. We'll then talk about web applications, followed by the resources for future development. So without further ado, let's make a start. So the first section is data types. So a data type is a JavaScript interpretation of the kind of data a program can work with. This is not just chained to JavaScript. You'll use data types in the vast majority of languages. The reason I mention JavaScript is that JavaScript is a client-side language heavily linked with web development, and this series of videos is relating to web development and HTML5 in the grand scheme of things. So data types include, we'll start off with a string. So when we look at a string is traditionally a sequence of characters. It stores alphanumeric combinations and text. So a string is really a group of characters stored together as one. Numbers to be used for calculations should not be used for strings. They can be stored as data, but they shouldn't be used for calculations. If you're wanting to do a calculation, you're better off using a number as an integer or real. More on the next bullet point. So for example, if you had 5 plus 5 as a string, it's a sequence of characters, it will give you the answer 55. It will give you 55. That's purely because we're saying add two strings together. One string could say hello, another string could say goodbye. When we add them together, hello, goodbye. If we just change them to one saying 5, another one saying 5, it will give us 55. So we wouldn't get the answer 10, which is what the answer that we would need. In order to do that, we then move on to integer or real. But ultimately, for the string, it would be for storing alphanumeric combinations and text. It's a group of characters stored together. For an integer, so an integer stores positive or negative whole numbers, for example the number 10. So if you added 5 and 5 together, so 5 plus 5 in an integer form, it will give you 10, it will give you the actual number and the calculation that you want. The main difference between integer and real is the type of value that it can store. So an integer can only store a whole number. A real type of data type, that stores numbers that contain decimal places and values, and can also store integers as well. So that could be, say, 10.65, for example. So it's a bit more granular, a bit more segmented, a bit more specific as a value, but nonetheless you can use both of them to make calculations. The next data type is an array. So an array of information, it's a series of objects, all of which are the same size and type. So for example, you can have an array of integers or an array of characters or an array of anything that has a defined data type. Could be people's ages, for example. We have an array of people, we've got an array of people's ages. The next data type is a Boolean. So a Boolean is two values. It's either yes or no or true or false. So did the user click this button? True. Yes, they did. Is the person over the age of 18 years? True. Yes, they are, or false. No, they're not. So Boolean is just two options, yes or no, true or false. The next option is null. So that's used in computer programming for an undefined, empty, or a meaningless value. So again, you would use null for that one. The next data type is an object. So an object is a bit like the overall view of things. So each object will have a property and it will have a method. So you could use the example for a car, for example. The car is the object in the grand scheme of things. Within a car, you'll have methods and you'll have properties linked to it. So when you're talking about a car's properties, you could look into the car's colour, the car's name, so it could be Ford. For example, the car model could be Focus, the car weight, for example. So we know what it is, we know what the object is, it is a car. We know the properties of that car, it could be a Ford Focus and it's in blue, for example. The next thing is the methods behind it. So the methods of a car would be start, drive, brake, stop, reverse. It's basically what can the car do, and that's the method of something. You could look into it in gaming as well, in regards to an object could be a player. Their properties could be blue hair, could wield a shield, for example, or a bow and arrow. The methods behind there could be, to fire that bow and arrow, to run, to go back, to jump, to crouch, for example. The next data type is undefined. So in computer programming, undefined behavior is the result of executing computer code linked or created by the language specification to which the code adheres to. So when a variable isn't assigned a value, it's undefined. So think of it a bit like a virtual handshake. Undefined is when it can't make that handshake, it can't make that connection between the two. So ultimately you don't want undefined behavior within your code. You want things to make the virtual handshake. And the last data type is a variable. So a JavaScript variable stands for a piece of data. So you would use the var, the var syntax, short for variable, to define a new variable within JavaScript. So it could be var first name, for example. So variable first name, and then you can associate certain bits of information. It's basically a way to store a piece of data. Variable names must begin with a letter or special variable with either the $sign or the underscore. Variable names are case sensitive, so an upper or lowercase variable are different, and again that will allow you to add more variables within the code that you're doing and allow you to segment the information as well much more easier. So those are the main data types that we're going to be discussing. So again, you can do further research into them, but those are the bulk of the data types that you will hear and you will come across if you're working with code. The next thing is web applications, or web apps, which they are shortened to as well. So they are a client-server computer program in which the client runs in a web browser. So there are many examples of this. It's basically a tool, for example, which you can use without downloading or storing onto the computer system. So Google Docs, Canva, or MailChimp are fantastic examples of this. You can create documents, newsletters, and graphic design work without installing the software onto your system and clogging up the memory. And if your computer system has admin rights, again, it gets around that by using web applications. So there are many benefits of using a web app or a web application. It's quick and easy to use, there's no installation required on the system, and it can allow for collaboration across the world. Google Docs being the perfect example of that. You can have multiple people working on the document at any one time. The next thing in relation to web applications is the app manifest. So required when uploading an application online. It basically defines key information such as language, version, name, storage, and so much more. So an application manifest, that's an XML file, extensible markup language, so it's a markup language, that describes and identifies the shared and private side-by-side assemblies that an application should bind to at runtime. So these should be the same assembly versions that were used when they were testing the application. So the app manifest or application manifest will include things such as the name, the type, the language, the architecture, and the version, as I mentioned. And the last bit of this slide is the app cache. So this saves a copy of website files locally in a structured form so you can view content offline. So when we're talking about the app cache, it's not the same as the browser cache. So the app cache saves a copy of website files locally in a structured form. The browser cache saves all web pages visited. The app cache only saves the files listed in the cache manifest, of which we've just spoken through. So the app cache actually uses the browser cache in support of its operation. So it's the browser equivalent of downloading an application to run locally on a device. So the first time a user visits the page, the resources of that page will be loaded from the server and stored in the normal browser cache. If the page specifies an app cache manifest, the browser will download the manifest and fetch all the resources in there, even if they do not appear on the page that embedded the manifest. These are then stored in the app cache. The second time a user visits the page, the browser will check its app cache. If an entry exists for that URL, it will load the page from the app cache instead of from the server. Based on the results specified in the manifest can mark some resources explicitly as fetched from the network. This will make it quicker for the user to get onto the website as it already has most of the information, it's already stored. So rather than running a marathon, it's just doing a quick sprint because the information is much closer to get. After the browser loads the page from the app cache, it will contact the server to see if there's an updated manifest. If the manifest is updated, so if there's been some changes on the web page, it will then fetch the resources from the updated manifest. These fetches are then done using normal browser cache rules. So basically, as soon as that web page is refreshed, it will then track down the more up-to-date and the fresher information. A new version of the app cache is kept separate from the old version. After the new version is fetched, the user keeps interacting with the resources from the old version, and as I mentioned, until they refresh the main page, after which the new version is loaded and the old one is discarded, i.e. replacing the old bit of information. If we're preparing a HTML5 application to be used offline, we would work with the app cache and ensure it's listed within the manifest. So ultimately, when you're talking about web applications, you're going to be working with the app manifest and also the app cache. There's a lot of information that goes on in the background of web applications in order to be easy to maintain, easy to get onto, and also easier to work offline as well. So that was the two main subjects that we've covered within this very, very short video. We're now going to the last slide, which is the resources for future development. There are many useful resources which you can use alongside this video to improve your knowledge around data types. On the screen you can find a few useful resources which will include discussions about data types. You will cover a more coding overview, however it will go through different data types. As for web apps, we covered the main overview of the term and also provided a few examples. So a few of the resources of which you could go to are W3 Skills, Udemy, Khan Academy, Solo Learn, Codecademy, and also Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is probably one of the biggest forums out there for software development. It's not so much a learning resource in regards to testing code, it's more of which a forum of where questions are asked and answers are provided. So that gets us to the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. So my name is Dan and you've been watching the video covering different data types and web applications. Thank you very much for watching and take care.